Captain Valenex had commanded the orbital defense grid of Kepler 4-4 to be for 3 decades. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. His 8 tentacles wrapped around the command console as he stared at the tactical display, watching symbols that represented entire cities simply ... vanish. The mechanical swarm moved across, his homeworld surface like a living shadow, consuming everything in its path with methodical precision. "Sir, the quantum cannons are completely ineffective," Lieutenant Zareth reported, her voice barely steady. "The machines are absorbing our energy attacks and converting them into fuel. They're actually getting stronger every time we fire." Velenex's throat sacs constricted with fear. How do you fight an enemy that feeds on your weapons? His people, the Velenari, had built their civilization on the principle of harmony. For 10,000 years, they had resolved conflicts through negotiation, their technology designed to disable rather than destroy. Even their most powerful weapons were calibrated for stunning, not killing. It had worked perfectly until now. Viewing screen flickered to life, showing the planet's surface, where the capital city of New Harmony had stood just hours ago. There was now only a massive crater filled with writhing metallic tendrils. Each tendril sprouted new mechanical creatures that immediately began spreading outward, seeking more matter to consume and convert. "My God," whispered Commander Thane, Valenix's human liaison officer. The pale-skinned Earthling had been stationed here as part of the Galactic Peace Initiative, but now his usually calm demeanor cracked. It's like watching cancer eat a body from the inside out. Velenex's tactical officer, a young Velenari named Keflin, suddenly straightened at his station. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Crystalline Confederation. They're offering immediate military assistance." "Put them through," Valenex ordered. Grasping at any hope, the holographic image of Archon Crystal Singer materialized above the command deck, his translucent form refracting the bridge's emergency lighting into prismatic rainbows.
"Captain Valenex,
we have observed your situation. Our energy matrices are at your disposal." Before Valenex could respond, another transmission cut through. "This is Hivemind Omega-7 of the Collective," the synthetic voice announced. "We offer our drone swarms to assist in your defense." More allies followed. The gas giant dwellers of Titan's Ring promised their atmospheric fighters. The silicon-based rock hewers offered their planetary siege weapons. Within minutes, representatives from a dozen civilizations were pledging support, their various forms crowding the holographic space above the command deck. But then something unexpected happened. A new signal cut through all the others, weak, distant, originating from the galaxy's outer rim territories. The voice that emerged was distinctly different from the melodious tones of the other species. It was harsh, guttural, speaking in a language that sounded like controlled violence given voice. "This is Admiral Jake Mitchell of the Earth Defense Force. We're monitoring your situation and are inbound with Battle Group 7, ETA 72 standard hours. Hold your position." "I agree." The holographic assembly fell silent. Lennox felt his skin shift from its normal blue-green to the pale gray of shock. Earth, the death world. Every civilized species knew the stories. A planet where the dominant life form had climbed to sentience, not through cooperation, but through 10 million years of systematic violence. Where gravity was crushing, the atmosphere was poisoned too. Most species and radiation levels would kill a Velenari within hours. Did he just say Earth? Crystal Singer's harmonic voice carried an undertone of disbelief. Commander Thane stepped forward, his face grim. "Admiral Mitchell is aggressive, but reliable. His people have experience with hostile situations." Hostile. Archon Crystal Singer's form flickered with agitation. "Captain Valinix, surely you're not considering accepting aid from those ... those creatures." Valinix watched another section of his homeworld disappear into the mechanical maw. Swarm had now consumed roughly 30% of the planet's landmass, and their projections showed complete planetary conversion within 18 hours. Every minute they spent debating, millions more of his people died. "What choice do we have?" Valinix's voice cracked as he spoke. "Our weapons feed them. Your energy matrices will only make them stronger. The Collective's drones will become part of their army. Nothing we have can stop them." "But the humans," Keflon whispered. his young voice filled with the terror that every civilized being felt when contemplating Earth's children. Captain, they're predators. They solve problems by destroying them. What if they decide we're the problem? It was a fair question. Humanity's reputation preceded them throughout the galaxy as species that had turned warfare into an art form, who spoke casually about concepts like acceptable casualties and strategic nuclear deployment. They were the boogeymen that civilized. Parents used to frighten their children into behaving, but as Velenix watched his beautiful world being methodically devoured, he realized something that chilled him more than any human ever could. The mechanical swarm was already doing exactly what everyone feared humans might do, consuming everything without negotiation, without mercy, without pause. At least he said quietly, humans choose when to be monsters. These machines don't have that luxury. The communication array suddenly erupted with proximity alarms. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching the system's edge. The Allied fleets, arriving faster than expected. But would they arrive in time? And more importantly, would conventional weapons fare any better than the Velenari's defensive systems? As if reading his thoughts, the swarm on the planet's surface suddenly shifted its behavior. Mechanical creatures stopped their seemingly random consumption and began forming geometric patterns across the landscape. They were preparing for something. Captain, his sensor operator called out, voice thick with dread. The swarm is launching something into orbit. Multiple contacts, moving fast. The truth hit Velenix like a plasma bolt to the chest. The mechanical swarm wasn't just consuming his world, it was preparing to spread. And now, with Allied fleets approaching, it had fresh targets to convert and consume. The question wasn't whether help would arrive in time. The question was whether that help would survive long enough to make a difference. The fabric of space itself seemed to tear open as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Velenix had witnessed hundreds of fleet arrivals in his career, but this was different. Most civilized species announced their presence with elegant light displays and harmonic frequencies that spoke of advanced technology and peaceful intentions. The humans? They arrived like a punch to the face. Their ships materialized in perfect formation without any of the usual spatial distortions or energy cascades that marked conventional hyperspace exits. One moment, empty void. The next, 57 vessels of war hanging in space like metallic predators. No sleek curves or bioluminescent holes that other species favored. These ships looked like they'd been designed by someone who understood that beauty meant nothing if you were dead. Sweet mother of stars, Commander Thane breathed, his face pressed against the observation port. I forgot how intimidating they look when they're serious. The lead vessel, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed even the largest Velenari ships, bore scorch marks and impact craters across its hull. Battle damage that the humans hadn't bothered to repair or maybe they wore it like badges of honor. The name U.S. Retribution was emblazoned across its prow in stark white letters that seemed to glow with menace. All vessels, this is Admiral Jake Mitchell aboard the Retribution. The voice that cut through their communications carried an authority that made Velenix's tentacles curl involuntarily. We're assuming tactical command of this engagement. Allied forces withdraw to minimum safe distance and prepare for debris cleanup. The assembled fleet of civilized species suddenly found themselves being ordered around like children. Velenix watched as the elegant ships of the Crystalline Confederation began backing away, their harmonic engines singing notes of confusion and mild offense. The collective's geometric drones simply stopped moving entirely, as if their hive mind was processing this unexpected development. Admiral Mitchell Velenix transmitted, trying to keep his voice steady. I appreciate your assistance, but you should understand what you're facing. These mechanical entities adapt to any energy signature within seconds. Our most advanced plasma cannons, the Confederation's crystal matrices, even the collective's antimatter projectors, they all became useless after the first few shots. There was a pause. Then, impossibly, the sound of human laughter came through the com channel. Captain Velenix, right? Don't worry about it. Good thing we brought Rox. Rox Velenix's translator had to be malfunctioning. Surely the humans hadn't traveled across half the galaxy to throw stones at an enemy that had consumed 3 star systems. That's when the human fleet opened fire. And Valenex learned what humans meant by rocks. The sound hit first a deep, thrumming vibration that seemed to shake the very atoms of space itself. Then came the light show, but not the elegant energy beams he expected. Instead, streams of tracer fire erupted from every human vessel, creating a web of death that reached out toward the mechanical swarm with hungry fingers. Kinetic bombardment, Commander Thane explained, his voice filled with something between awe and horror. They're firing solid projectiles at relativistic speeds. No energy signature to adapt to, no exotic particles to analyze, just mass times velocity equals dead machines. The mechanical swarm, which had effortlessly shrugged off every weapon the civilized galaxy could throw at it, suddenly found itself in a world of hurt. Their adaptive shields, designed to analyze and counter energy weapons, flickered pathetically as tungsten rods moving at near-light speed punched through them like they were made of tissue paper. But here's the thing that made Valenix's blood run cold. The humans weren't just throwing rocks, they were throwing smart rocks. Each projectile adjusted its trajectory mid-flight, seeking out critical systems with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Power cores, command nodes, weapon systems, everything the machines needed to function, was being systematically obliterated by what amounted to very expensive pebbles. How is this possible? Archon Crystal Singer's harmonic voice cut through the tactical channel, his usual composure shattered. They're using primitive kinetic weapons against technology that transcends our understanding. Sometimes, Admiral. Mitchell's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. The old ways are the best ways. You can't adapt to physics. Physics says a 2-kilogram tungsten rod moving at 0.97 light speed will ruin your whole day. The mechanical swarm tried to respond, launching clouds of smaller units toward the human fleet. But the humans had anticipated this. Point defense systems that looked like nothing more than oversized machine guns began, spitting streams of projectiles that created impenetrable walls of metal death. Every machine that tried to approach a human vessel was reduced to component atoms before it could get within 1,000 kilometers. That's when things got really interesting. Captain Emma Rodriguez, to all strike team leaders. A new voice cut through the chaos, this one carrying a barely contained eagerness that made Valenix's skin crawl. Boarding parties are authorized and cleared hot. Time to teach these tin cans. About close quarters combat? Boarding parties? Valenix transmitted frantically. Admiral, those ships are filled with hostile mechanical entities designed to convert organic matter into scrap metal. Once we're done with them, Captain Rodriguez interrupted. Don't worry, Captain. We've done this before. Salt. Pods began launching from the human vessels. Not the sleek insertion craft that civilized species use for peaceful boarding actions, but what looked like armored bullets designed to punch through hull plating and keep going. Each pod slammed into mechanical vessels with enough force to crater battleship armor, then disgorged squads of humans in powered armor that made them look like walking tanks. Through his sensors, Valenix watched something that redefined his understanding of ground combat. The mechanical entities that had torn through his people's finest soldiers like wet paper suddenly found themselves facing opponents who moved like liquid death through narrow corridors. The humans didn't just fight, they flowed around obstacles, used the environment as a weapon, displayed a tactical awareness that spoke of millennia spent perfecting the art of killing things that needed killing. Contact front. Came a human voice over the com. These things are fast. Then we'll be faster, another human replied. And Valenix could hear the sound of weapons fire and tearing metal in the background. Remember, people, these bastards killed billions of civilians. No mercy, no prisoners, no quarter given. And there, it was the difference between civilized warfare and human warfare. The Velinari fought to disable and subdue. The humans fought to win, and winning meant the complete and utter destruction of anything that threatened the innocent. They had turned righteous anger into a tactical advantage, the mechanical swarm built to analyze and adapt to energy weapons. In conventional tactics, had never encountered anything like human boarding parties. How do you adapt to opponents who switch between plasma rifles, explosive charges, and when necessary, their bare hands? How do you counter enemies who fight with controlled chaos and creative violence? The answer, it turned out, was simple. You don't. One by one, the mechanical vessels went dark as human strike teams completed their work. But something was bothering Valinix. The swarm was adapting, learning from each engagement. And if the humans had taught him anything, it was that underestimating your enemy was the fastest way to get killed. The assault pod's impact sent shockwaves through Lieutenant Marcus Thompson's powered armor as it punched through 3 layers of alien hull plating like a bullet through butter. The cutting charges detonated with surgical precision, and suddenly, Marcus found himself breathing recycled air inside. What could only be described as a mechanical nightmare. The interior of the swarm ship defied every principle of logical design. Walls pulsed with organic-looking conduits that carried streams of molten metal instead of blood. Corridors twisted and branched like the inside of some massive beast's digestive system. And everywhere, the sound of machinery grinding and clicking filled the air with a rhythm that suggested intelligence, malevolent, alien intelligence that had never known mercy. "Bravo, team. Sound off," Marcus commanded, his rifle already tracking movement in the shadows ahead. Corporal Danny Williams, locked and loaded, came the first response. Sergeant Lisa Brown, ready to rock and roll, followed the second. Private Kyle Anderson, scared but angry, added the third, which actually made Marcus smile beneath his helmet. At least Anderson was honest about it. The squad moved through the ship's bowels with the fluid precision of predators who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to hunt things that could hunt them back. Each Marine covered a different angle, their movements choreographed by countless hours of training and an instinctive understanding of violence that civilized species couldn't comprehend. That's when they met their first mechanical entity up. Close and personal, the thing that emerged from a side passage looked like someone had taken a spider, crossed it with a chainsaw, and then given the whole mess a bad attitude and anger management issues. 8 metallic legs moved with impossible speed, each one ending in cutting tools that could probably slice through battleship armor. Its central body housed what appeared to be sensor arrays that immediately began scanning the humans with beams of red light, contact front. Sergeant Brown's voice cut through the cum as she opened fire with her plasma rifle. "These things are fast." The mechanical spider thing moved like liquid lightning, dodging Brown's first 3 shots and using its legs to run up the wall and across the ceiling. Its sensors were already analyzing the plasma discharge, probably figuring out how to counter it within seconds. "Then we'll be faster," Marcus growled, diving behind a bulkhead as mechanical appendages whipped through the air where his head had been. The creature's limbs left glowing cuts in the metal wall cuts that were exactly head height. These things weren't just fast, they were smart enough to go for kill shots. But here's the thing about humans that the mechanical entities hadn't figured out yet. When you threaten something they care about, they don't just get mad. They get creative. "Remember, people?" Marcus shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "These bastards killed billions of civilians down on that planet. Men, women, children, didn't matter to them. They consumed everything without a second thought. Show them what human anger looks like." The change in his Marines was immediate and terrifying. Professional soldiers became apex predators. Their movements shifted from careful tactics to controlled fury. Anderson, who'd admitted to being scared just moments before, suddenly charged. The mechanical spider with nothing but his sidearm and what appeared to be complete disregard for his own safety. "Anderson, what the hell are you doing?" Brown screamed. "Something stupid." Anderson replied cheerfully, sliding under the creature's slashing limbs and jamming his pistol against what looked like a critical joint. The explosion of sparks and mechanical screaming that followed suggested he'd found something important. The mechanical entity tried to adapt, its sensors working overtime to analyze the human's tactics. But how do you analyze pure righteous fury? How do you counter opponents who switch between plasma rifles, explosive charges, and when necessary, their bare hands? "Thompson, we've got a problem," Brown shouted over the sound of tearing metal, as she physically ripped a sensor array off another mechanical creature. "These things are trying to assimilate our tech, or learning from our weapons." Marcus watched as thin metallic tendrils began extending from a damaged machine, reaching toward Brown's discarded plasma rifle. The weapon began to change, its human design being corrupted and absorbed into the alien technology. Within seconds, it would become another weapon in the swarm's arsenal. That's when Marcus smiled grimly and pulled out a device that would have horrified any civilized species. Plasma grenade with the safety pin already removed. The kind of weapon that most galactic treaties specifically banned for being too dangerous to everyone involved. "Let them try to assimilate this," he said. Lobbed the grenade directly into the cluster of mechanical entities. The explosion that followed lit up the corridor like a miniature sun. The plasma discharge vaporized 3 machines instantly and sent others scrambling for cover. Their adaptive systems overloaded by the sheer amount of energy being released in such a confined space. But more importantly, the explosions severed the tendrils that were trying to absorb human technology. "That's the difference between us and them," Marcus explained to his squad as they pressed forward through the wreckage. "They think logically, trying to adapt and overcome. We think emotionally, and emotion makes us unpredictable." The humans pressed deeper into the ship, not with the cold logic of their mechanical enemies, but with the hot fury of a species that had climbed to the top of their food chain through 10 million years of controlled violence. Every corridor became a battlefield. Every junction was a potential ambush site, and at each encounter, the mechanical entities found themselves facing opponents who refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. Williams used explosive charges to bring down ceiling sections, crushing mechanical entities under tons of debris. Brown discovered that the ship's own power conduits could be weaponized, turning the vessel's electrical systems against its mechanical crew. Anderson, apparently deciding that subtlety was overrated, began using a cutting torch to simply carve through anything that moved, but it was Marcus who found the ship's central processing core. Massive chamber filled with quantum processors and data storage units that hummed with malevolent intelligence. This was the brain of the beast, the central node that coordinated the swarm's activities. "Bridge secured," Marcus reported over the though calling this pulsing mechanical nightmare a bridge was generous. Beginning demolition protocols. The demolition charges his team placed weren't the surgical explosives that civilized species used for precise structural damage. These were human-designed devices that operated on the principle that if you're going to blow something up, you might as well do it thoroughly. Each charge contained enough explosive power to level a city block, and Marcus's team had brought 12 of them. "All teams, this is Thompson." He broadcast to the other boarding parties scattered throughout the mechanical fleet. "We're about to turn this ship into the galaxy's most expensive fireworks display. Suggest you find the exits." Space lit up with secondary explosions as human boarding parties completed their work across the mechanical fleet. Ship after ship went dark, their adaptive systems helpless against an enemy that fought with chaos and creativity rather than predictable tactics. The mechanical entities had been designed to analyze and counter energy weapons, not to deal with opponents who used emotional intelligence as a tactical advantage. But as Marcus and his team made their way back to their extraction point, this combat experience was telling him something that made his blood run cold. The explosions were too easy, the resistance to light. These machines were learning, adapting not just to human technology, but to human tactics. And if there was one thing Marcus had learned in 15 years of combat, it was that an enemy who learned from their mistakes was an enemy you couldn't afford to underestimate twice. The real battle, he realized, was just beginning. Admiral Jake Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the final mechanical vessel break apart in the cold vacuum of space. The debris field stretched for thousands of kilometers, twisted, metal, shattered processing cores, and the remnants of what had once been the most terrifying threat the civilized galaxy had ever faced. The silence on the bridge was profound, broken only by the soft hum of life support systems and the occasional beep of monitoring equipment. His crew moved with the quiet efficiency of professionals who had just completed another day at the office, even though that office happened to be the epicenter of galactic warfare. "Casualty report," Mitchell ordered, his voice carrying the weight of command that had seen him. Through 3 decades of conflicts across the galaxy's rim territories, Commander Ryan Davis, his executive officer, consulted his tablet with the practiced ease of someone who had delivered far too many such reports. 12 KIA, 37 wounded. Most injuries are minor plasma burns, impact trauma, the usual boarding party casualties. Lieutenant Martinez took shrapnel to the leg, but she's already back on duty. Mitchell nodded grimly. 12 dead. Any other military force in the galaxy, losing 12 soldiers, would be considered a catastrophic failure. Among civilized species, military casualties were so rare that losing even 1 soldier would result in formal inquiries, grief counselors, and probably a complete review of tactics. But for humans, 12 dead out of nearly 3,000 Marines engaged in boarding operations was what they called a light day. The fact that they could even think in those terms was probably what made the rest of the galaxy simultaneously grateful for and terrified of Earth's children. Make sure the families get the full package, Mitchell said quietly. Pension, education, benefits for the kids, the works. And I want personal letters, not form documents. Already on it, sir, Davis replied. That's what Mitchell appreciated about his crew. They understood that taking care of their own wasn't just policy, it was sacred duty. The communication array suddenly crackled to life, and Captain Valinix's face appeared on the main screen. The alien's tentacles were shifting through a complex pattern of colors that Mitchell had learned to recognize as deep emotional distress mixed with overwhelming gratitude. Admiral Mitchell Valinix began, his translator struggling to convey the depth of emotion in his voice. We cannot express our gratitude. Your people have saved not just our world, but our entire civilization. The mechanical swarm would have consumed everything: our cities, our culture, our children. You have given us back our future. Mitchell felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders like a familiar burden. How many times had he heard similar speeches from alien leaders whose worlds the human military had pulled back from the brink? How many civilizations owed their continued existence to soldiers like the 12 who wouldn't be going home? Don't thank us yet, Captain, Mitchell replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again. These machines didn't just appear out of nowhere. Someone or something created them. Till we know who and why, your people aren't safe. Through the view screen, he could see Valinix's ship approaching a graceful vessel that looked more like a work of art than a warship. Its smooth curves and bioluminescent panels spoke of a species that had never needed to prioritize function. Over form, never needed to choose between beauty and survival. But Mitchell knew what was coming next. It always did. The alien captain would want to understand how humans had accomplished what seemed impossible. He would ask about their tactics, their weapons, their strategies. And Mitchell would have to explain the truth that civilized species found so difficult to accept, Admiral Valinix continued. If I may ask, how did you do it? Our weapons, the Confederation's energy matrices, even the Collective's antimatter projectors, they all became useless within minutes. Yet your forces destroyed the entire swarm in less than 8 hours. What technology do you possess that we lack? There it was, the question that always came after the gratitude. Mitchell exchanged a glance with Commander Davis, who simply shrugged. They'd had this conversation before with other alien leaders, and it never got easier. It's not about technology, Captain, Mitchell said slowly. It's about philosophy. Your people, all civilized species, you develop weapons to disable, to subdue, to minimize harm. You fight wars to end conflicts as quickly as possible with the least casualties on both sides. Of course, Valinix replied, clearly confused. What other approach is there? The human approach, Mitchell said grimly. We don't fight to minimize casualties. We fight to win. And winning means the complete destruction of anything that threatens innocent lives. We've spent 10,000 years learning how to kill things efficiently, and we've gotten very, very good at it. The silence that followed was deafening. Mitchell could see the horror dawning in Valinix's large eyes as the implications sank in. Humans weren't just more advanced. They were fundamentally different. They had weaponized violence itself and turned it into an art form. But surely, Valenix whispered, such capabilities could be misused. What prevents your species from ... from becoming like the swarm you just destroyed? It was a fair question, and Mitchell had spent many sleepless nights contemplating the same concern. What separated humans from the mechanical entities they had just annihilated? What kept Earth's children from becoming the very monsters they fought against? Choice, Mitchell answered simply. The swarm consumed everything, because that's what it was programmed to do. It had no choice, no conscience, no ability to say enough. We could glass your world from orbit, turn your star system into an asteroid field, eliminate every trace of your civilization within hours. But we choose not to. We choose to use our capabilities to protect rather than conquer. He paused, watching Valenix process this information. That choice, that's what makes us guardians instead of destroyers. But it's a choice we have to make. Every single day, with every engagement, with every decision to pull the trigger or hold fire. The weight of that responsibility was something that every human in the fleet carried. They were the galaxy's protectors, precisely because they understood destruction so completely. They could end civilizations, but they chose to preserve them instead. The mechanical swarm met its match, Mitchell continued, because it encountered a species that understands violence so completely, we can wield it like a surgical instrument. We know exactly how much force to apply, when to apply it, and most importantly, when to stop. But even as he spoke those words, Mitchell's tactical mind was working on the larger problem. The swarm had been too organized, too sophisticated to be a random emergence. Someone had built these machines, programmed them, unleashed them on the galaxy. And that someone was still out there, probably learning from this defeat just as the humans had learned from countless battles before. The real war, Mitchell realized, hadn't ended with the destruction of the swarm. It had just begun. Next. Time. Their enemy would be prepared for humanity's unique approach to problem solving. The question was, would the galaxy be ready for what came next? 6 months had passed since the mechanical swarm's defeat, but Captain Kelly Williams still felt the weight of that victory every morning when she looked out at the stars. The newly constructed Earth Defense Station orbited Valenix's home world like a metallic moon. Its angular human architecture, a stark contrast to the graceful spires of the alien cities below. Through the observation deck's reinforced windows, Kelly watched something that would have been impossible just a year ago. Human engineers worked shoulder to shoulder with Velinary scientists, their bulky environmental suits moving carefully around the aliens' delicate crystalline forms. The scene looked like something out of a diplomatic fantasy too completely. Different species sharing knowledge and building something together. But Kelly knew the truth was more complicated than it appeared. Your people still fear us, she observed quietly as Captain Valenix joined her at the observation window. The alien had become an unlikely friend over the months since the crisis. But she could still see the way his tentacles unconsciously curled. When human marines walked past in the corridors, Valenix's skin shifted through several colors before settling on the pale gray that humans had learned. Indicated deep contemplation mixed with discomfort. Can you honestly blame them, Kelly? Species treats warfare like other civilizations treat art. You study it, perfect it, pass down techniques through generations. You killed machines that were specifically designed to be unkillable. Because someone had to, Kelly replied with the simple directness that marked all human military communication. Look down there, Valenix. What do you see? The alien captain pressed closer to the window, his large eyes scanning the planet's surface. Cities had been rebuilt where the mechanical swarm had left only craters. Parks and gardens bloomed where once there had been twisted metal and death. Children's actual Velinary children played in streets that 6 months ago had been battlefields. I see my world healing, Valenix said softly. Exactly. Your people create beauty, art, philosophy. Build things that actually matter, things that make life worth living. We learned to break things so you could keep building. Kelly's voice carried no bitterness, only the quiet acceptance of someone who understood her role in the galaxy's grand design. It was a division of labor that had emerged naturally after humanity joined the galactic community. The civilized species excelled at creation, cooperation, and advancement. Humans excelled at controlled destruction when creation needed protection. And now, Valinix asked, gesturing toward the research facility that had been constructed in the station's lower levels. Kelly smiled, expression still strange to see reflected in the observation window's glass. Now we teach you to defend yourselves. Not to become like us. The galaxy doesn't need more humans. But so you don't have to rely entirely on us when the next threat emerges. And there would be a next threat. Kelly's intelligence briefings made that clear. Mechanical swarm hadn't been a random occurrence. Someone had built those machines, programmed them, unleashed them with a specific purpose. The victory over the swarm had bought time, not safety, through the station's internal cameras. Kelly could observe the joint training exercises happening in the lower decks. Human drill sergeants, carefully selected for their patience and cultural sensitivity, were teaching Velinary security forces basic combat techniques. Not the brutal efficiency that human Marines learned, but enough defensive knowledge to buy time when help was needed. It's fascinating to watch, Valinix commented, apparently following her thoughts. Your Sergeant Martinez spent 3 hours yesterday teaching my officers how to properly take cover. Such a simple concept, yet none of us had ever considered. That the shape of our defensive positions could mean the difference between life and death. Kelly nodded. It's the little things that matter in combat, where people think in terms of elegant solutions and minimal force. We think in terms of survival and overwhelming response. Both approaches have their place. The joint research facility below them represented something entirely new in galactic history. Human weapon designers worked alongside alien engineers, not to create more destructive tools, to develop defensive systems that could protect civilized worlds without requiring them to abandon their principles. Look at that, Kelly pointed to a group of technicians working on what appeared to be a shield generator. Dr. Amanda Foster spent 2 weeks learning how your crystalline matrices work. Now she's helping your people build defensive screens that can adapt to different threat types without becoming offensive weapons themselves. It was a delicate balance. The civilized species needed protection, but they also needed to remain civilized. Turning them into warriors would destroy the very thing that made them worth protecting. Sometimes I wonder, Valinix said quietly, what would happen if your species ever decided that protecting us wasn't worth the cost? You could conquer the entire galaxy within a decade if you chose to. Kelly was quiet for a long moment, watching a human instructor demonstrate proper evacuation procedures to a group of young Velinary cadets. The children were listening with rapt attention, their translator devices rendering the humans' words into musical tones they could understand. We could, she admitted finally. But we won't. You want to know why? Please. Because conquering you would be easy. Protecting you is hard. And humans have never been ones to choose the easy path when the hard path leads somewhere better. Kelly's reflection in the window showed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Besides, what would be the point of ruling a galaxy full of slaves when we could have friends instead? Valinix's skin shifted to the deep blue that indicated profound respect among his people. Deathworlders, he murmured, using the term that had become common throughout the galaxy when referring to Earth's children. Guardians, Kelly corrected gently, the way she always did when that word came up. There's a difference. A Deathworlder destroys because destruction is all it knows. A Guardian destroys only what threatens the things it protects. The twin suns of Valinix's system were setting behind the space station, casting long shadows. Across the peaceful world below, cities glowed with warm light, and Kelly could see the running lights of civilian transports moving between orbital platforms. Life continuing, growing, thriving exactly as it should be. As darkness fell across half the planet, other lights became visible. The gleaming hulls of patrol ships, some human, some alien, all working together to maintain the peace that had been won at such a high cost. The mechanical swarm is gone, Kelly said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen the aftermath reports, but its legacy lives on. Not in the destruction it caused, but in what we built afterward. Bonds between species that had never trusted each other. Knowledge shared across cultural barriers that seemed impossible to cross. A galaxy that learned it was stronger together than apart. Valenix nodded, his tentacles weaving patterns of agreement. And if another threat emerges, Kelly's smile this time was sharp enough to cut steel. Then Earth's children will answer the call. We always do. But next time, you'll be ready to stand with us instead of just behind us. The message was clear as the stars came out over Valinex's homeworld. The galaxy had its gardeners and its guardians, its creators and its protectors. And as long as Earth's children stood watch, civilizations like Valinex's could continue to bloom among the stars. Safe in the knowledge that when darkness came in, it would come again, humanity would be ready to meet it with controlled fury, an unwavering resolve. But in the depths of space, in systems yet unexplored, something else was watching. Something that had learned from the swarm's defeat. It was already planning its next move. The war for the galaxy's future was far from over. The end.